Thanks for staying with us, Breakfast Central's second hour. Well, as we continue to discuss the results and following aftermath of the 25th February election, one thing that was quite shocking was the tough battle between Senator Bola Tinubu, now President-elect, and of course the Labour Party candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, not forgetting the PDP presidential candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. Well, the Labour Party candidate Peter Obi winning the Lagos State votes by a landslide left many of the political elite wondering if the now President-elect had lost his state. Well, although the All Progressives APC also failed to pull a win in Kano, Osun, Katsina and FCT Abuja, losing Lagos seems to cut very deep.
Absolutely. A post-mortem of the shocking result in Lagos yielded two significant conclusions. The first was that the ruling party in Lagos had lost the support of young voters, a critical demographic in the 2023 elections. And the second was that this one is even more worrying, was that it had lost the confidence of the educated middle-class population in Lagos. Of course, there have been protests, especially following the results of the governorship elections, which has been described as the most divisive and ethnocentric campaign. Are these claims true? Joining us to further shed light on this conversation is Ayo Adio, not a new face on Breakfast Central. He's, of course, a political and communication strategist and also the National Publicity Secretary of the Youth Party. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about the article that you wrote where you painted a picture of the just concluded elections as you said it is not just divisive, but ethnocentric, right? We'd like you to shed some light on what you meant by this.
I mean, of course, we also what happened in the Lagos elections, that 2 weeks before the Lagos state elections, it would seem that the ruling party decided not to run on its merit, if it had any, or decided not to run on its record. It decided to run a very divisive ethnic profiling campaign, that seemed to paint the opposition as a political party that was pursuing a parochial interest of a particular region of the country, and demonized that group in order to stir up a base, what social scientists call an in-group, and rally them around the perceived enemy and mobilize them to the polls. So, I mean, you saw videos all over the internet of people warning a group of people from a specific part of the country not to come out and vote. And if they had to come out and vote, they had to vote for a particular candidate or a particular political party. And it would seem that, they had already concluded that that particular demographic were solely responsible for the electoral failure in the presidential election. And they were going to do everything possible to stop people from that particular ethnic group to come out and vote in the governorship election. Now, it moved away from rhetoric to action on election day because we all saw, the widespread violence and voter suppression, across Lagos State. That was very distasteful to see. Was very undemocratic, and one of the worst elections we've seen in Lagos in a very long time.
All right, Dio, in your article, you did say that the ruling elect has lost Lagos State. How is that possible, having received the certificate of return and looking forward to push forward in completing some of the projects? I mean, how is this possible?
If I heard you correctly, you were asking how have Lagos lost the two demographic that I spoke about in the article. Yes, I mean, clearly, if you look at the demographic in Lagos State, you will see that, in the last 2, 3, 4 election cycles, Lagos State, the APC in Lagos State have won elections by mobilizing a certain kind of demographic, to the polls. And they have succeeded largely because voter turnout has been largely between 16% and 20% in most elections in Lagos State. And as long as the voter turnout is low, they will succeed essentially by mobilizing their own base, which I argue is an aging demographic, in Lagos State. The party has lost appeal for many young people across the state. It's lost appeal for the working class, middle class population in Lagos State, many of them who live in what I described as gated estates across Lagos. If you look at the polling, if you look at the data and see how where the elections were won and lost, particularly in the presidential elections, even though many people would like to argue that a bit of religious sentiments played a role, you will still realize that, the party always loses elections where there's a correlation between the middle class population in a specific area. So whether it's in a Tiosa, for instance, where you have, a dominant middle class, middle to high income population, the party doesn't do well in those areas. And when you even come to places like Oshofe, the estates like the Magodos, the Omoles, the party doesn't do significantly well in areas where you have middle to high income, earners, which is why I argued that they've lost the confidence of that particular demographic. So clearly what happened in the election was that they realized that if we don't have young people, we don't have, middle class population in Lagos State, if we also lost people from this particular ethnic group to vote in one block, there's absolutely no way they could have won that election, and hence informed the strategy that they pursued, 2-3 weeks ago.
All right, let's talk about something else you referenced in your article. You said that the governor of Lagos State, Sanwo-Olu, and that the Lagos APC have opened the Pandora's box and crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. I would like you to also explain what you meant by this.
I mean, it's painful what has happened because people have lived in so much harmony in Lagos State. For instance, I was having lunch, at the restaurant sometime last week, and I heard the waitress openly having conversations with her friends, demonizing people from a particular ethnic group. She was doing so brazenly and so publicly, and I was shocked, at the courage that she had to make such very vile utterances publicly. Now, she could only do those things because it's been thrown completely open. A political party has won a campaign on that by demonizing people. They've suppressed votes. They've injured so many in the process. They've made people from that particular ethnic group look like the enemy that could never be trusted. And unfortunately, this has sieved down, to everyday conversation, and people are becoming more emboldened, to show bigotry. And people are becoming more emboldened to profile people ethnically. And that's a very terrible thing to happen in a mega city like Lagos. And I always say this, that we would have to decide what kind of Lagos we want. Do we want a cosmopolitan mega city that competes with the Johannesburgs of this world, with Londons, with Cairos, and all the mega cities in the world? Or we want a Yoruba Yoruba caliphate where we pander to certain parochial and ethnic sentiments that moves nobody anywhere. I would argue that we want a cosmopolitan Lagos that pulls together talent and ideas, that pulls in capital from every part of the world, that stimulates potential, and where people can realize their dreams, and their long-held desires. That's the kind of Lagos we want to build, not some sort of Yoruba caliphate, that panders to the emotions, and identity politics, and a bit of fascism that people are beginning to stoke in our polity. And for me, I think that except, the governor, for instance, openly comes out to categorically state that we are running a Lagos for everyone, and condemn all of the violence that happened, and condemn all of the ethnic profilings that happened, I think that it will be a difficult corner to turn, because these things have sieved into the markets, it's sieved into WhatsApp groups. People are consistently demonizing a people from a particular ethnic group, talking about, not renting properties to them, not selling anything to them. That's not the kind of country or the state that we want to build.
Well, if I may, I think the governor also made a statement recently where he talked about what you just mentioned, of everyone just taking it easy, and let's get to work together. Let's ensure that progress is made in the state. And he kind of like enjoined everyone, which he has done, bringing everyone together. In other words, speaking about the need for us to all neglect, if there's anything like that, the bigotry that did take place prior to the elections. But what exactly are people looking forward to hear the governor do? This is just focused on Lagos State, because the judiciary is another thing we need to talk about, but maybe not today. We can also take a look at that aspect of judiciary, also take a look at the electoral body. But you're a communications specialist. I'd like you to bring your communications specialization into the fold, bring it to the forefront. What should the governor do, especially now that the politics seems to have been heated up? And like you rightly said, there are lots of conversations in different quarters here and there. In some parts of Lagos, we saw some of the bus drivers fighting and saying they're done with the agberos, they're tired of paying money, 13,000 naira per day, and so on and so forth.
The governor of Lagos State has his work cut out for him. First of all, what I'd like to see the governor do is to, in specific terms, condemn the violence and the ethnic profiling that happened before elections and even on election day. I'd like to see him categorically make statements condemning such violence and committing to bring people who were perpetrators of these dastardly acts to book. The second thing is that in the kind of magnanimity that he showed towards the gentleman who was abused by certain police officers last week and agreed that the Lagos State was going to pay a compensation of 5 million naira. I'd like to see that kind of gesture extended to people who were victims of violence, of the elections 2-3 weeks ago. In fact, I even argue that he should push for a bit of inquiry for people who were hurt, people who were oppressed, and people who were injured, and then put some sort of compensation together to show some sort of empathy and to also send a signal, that violence and voter suppression will not be tolerated, in elections, in Lagos State. And thirdly, I'd like to see the governor govern from the center, and not just to show in words, but in action, that everybody in Lagos State means something, and that, everybody in Lagos State contributes to this beautiful pot, that we have in Lagos, and then he should also lead from the front and show some sort of, solidarity with people who feel hurt, extend an arm of fellowship, and so that we can continue to live peacefully as we have always done, in Lagos State. On a personal note, I would go a step further to advocate, that there are certain laws that should be put in place, against public profiling, ethnic profiling, discrimination based on ethnic groups or religious beliefs. I would argue that that's a step that we may need to consider to protect the very fragile social cohesion that we've enjoyed over time.
Thank you so much, Adio, for joining us. Deep conversations. These conversations will not go away anytime soon, and I'm sure we'll continue to have them, most importantly, here on Breakfast Central. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right.